Hi class, this week we're going to be talking about Chapter 2, which is called Where to Start. These are some learning objectives for this week. You're welcome to read them on your own. The agenda for today is that we are mostly going to cover how you find past research in order to inform your own study. Last week we talked a bit about the scientific method, also referred to the stages of social research, and there was 5 different steps. This class is focusing on step 2, which is developing your method. However, before you get to that step 2, which is deciding your method, you have to decide what your research study is to begin with. So a preliminary step before you even get into the 5 steps is deciding your topic or your research question that you're interested in studying. Then you read a lot about your topic to understand it better. Based on this, you decide where the gaps or the unknowns are. Based on those unknowns, you can develop your hypothesis, or aka a more specific research question that can actually be tested. And then you can write your prediction, which is an educated guess of what you think is going to happen. So these are the same 5 steps listed here, but they're just divided out into more specific detail. So, like I said last class, don't be intimidated. You've done this before, but now you're at university, so the steps are just more thorough now. This was a picture of me back in 4th grade during the science fair. So let's talk about where to start. So that's the topic of this, that's the title of this chapter. So I like to think of it as a funnel. So see, you have a funnel here. So you start big and then you get smaller. So you have this research question, which is kind of a big idea, a big topic of what you're interested in studying. Then you read about it. So you read lots of different reports, different research articles that have studied that before. And then you write a hypothesis or a more specific research question, and then you write your prediction or what you think is going to happen. So you start big and you get smaller. Here's an example from the book. So the research question or the big idea was, what causes depression? The person then read reports and they found the problem, and the problem means that what other articles have left out or what other articles have recommended for future research. So different reports that they read, they looked at some theory, they looked at some research reports, they looked at specific details of other different studies in order to come up with their hypothesis. And this is their more specific research question. So their big research question was, what causes depression? The hypothesis makes it operational. So it makes you be able to specify the causes of depression to be able to actually do a study on it. So the hypothesis is depression is related to the types of attributions made about success and failure experiences. So it made it more specific. And then a prediction is what you think is going to happen. So it made it even more specific. So I couldn't fit it into right here, but here I have it listed over here. The prediction is, in comparison to those with minimal or mild depression, participants categorized as having moderate or severe depression based on the Beck Depression Inventory score will score higher on luck when responding to a success experience and higher on personal causes when responding to a failure experience. So as you see, we funneled it down from something big to something smaller and more specific, and actually something that can be studied. Here's an example from the book. So we went from research question to hypothesis to prediction. So these are the definitions of each of these right here. So the research question is a broad topic. Hypothesis is a tentative idea or a more specific question. A prediction is a deliberate guess at the answer to the hypothesis. So an example, and as you see, it went from general to specific. An example. Are there differences among groups in terms of cell phone use while driving? The hypothesis, let's make it more specific. Do males and females differ in their use of cell phones while driving? And then the prediction is what you think is going to happen based on the hypothesis. Females are more likely to use a cell phone while driving. So that's an example of the same funnel that I have here. It's just in this way. So a research question is formulated as the first and most general step in the research process. Don't make it too broad. Make it broad, but not too broad. That way the funnel is doable. A hypothesis is a specific research question. It's a tentative answer to the research question. And then a prediction is a guess of the outcome of the study. So the prediction must follow directly from the hypothesis. It needs to be testable, and it must include specific variables and methodologies. So let's look at some more examples. So this right here, this is spare the rod, spoil the child. This right here is the research question or the big topic that they're interested in. So let's read it. Generally, a way of saying that children need to be disciplined when misbehaving. Otherwise, they will become spoiled and will always act out on their own way. A more literal interpretation is that physical punishment or use of the rod is an effective way of changing behavior in children. So write a hypothesis. Parental use of physical punishment is related to less antisocial behavior in adolescence and adulthood. And then make a prediction. Adolescents who indicate that their parents used higher amounts of punishment for misbehaving will be described by their teacher as less aggressive and disruptive in the classroom when interacting with peers. And then absence makes the heart grow fonder. This research question. Physical separation enhances romantic emotional feelings. Let's write a hypothesis for that. Physical and psychological separation of romantic partners is related to romantic attraction. And then make a prediction. Romantic partners who have been together for more than a year will report higher levels of romantic attraction when isolated from one another for 1 week. So as you can see, again, it did that same funnel. It started broad and then got more specific, got more measurable, got more testable. So yeah, as psychological researchers, we're always interested in testing hypotheses, and you test the hypothesis with data. So in the data, you gather through the method, and we're going to talk about that the rest of this class. We're going to be learning about different types of methods since this class is called research methods. So research methods is a way to be able to gather data, to be able to answer a hypothesis, to be able to test it. And your study either supports the hypothesis or you reject it and try with a different method, because there's so many different types of methods in research, and we're going to, again, cover those throughout this class. So some sources of ideas of where to start. So we're at the top of that funnel right now. We're just kind of wondering, what is our research question? What is our big topic that we're interested in? So there are 5 different ways to start the research process. You can use your common sense. So you can think of a research question that we consider common sense. For example, do opposites attract? Do birds flock together? And you could consider testing something like that. You could try to make it more specific through reviewing journal articles and see where the gaps in literature are, what we don't understand about opposites attracting, what we don't understand about birds flocking together, to be able to test something about that. You can also think of practical problems. So think of a research question you need to answer at your job right now. So for example, a city planner seeking to create a bike path in Dallas might want to know, what are the streets currently being used by bicyclists for morning commutes? You can observe the world around us. That might help you decide a research question. So what causes people to tip at restaurants? Does explicit music lead to increased drug and alcohol use? You can think of past research. So you can think of a research question based on previous research. So you can look at past articles and you can look for what the author recommends as future research and determine what they did well and what they didn't do well in the study, and then you can make your research question on that. So for example, an article did a study on cell phone use and found that 11% of drivers used cell phones while driving out of a parking lot. Your follow-up research question could be, how can we reduce cell phone use? So the past researcher found out that it was happening, and now you as a researcher want to fix it so it stops happening. So you may come up with this on your own. It could also be in the concluding details of a research study. They may recommend it for future research. So a lot of the time, even almost all of the time, at the end of an empirical research article, there's going to be recommendations for future research. And so the researcher that wrote that article would recommend future studies to be able to continue that research, to be able to make that research more applicable. Another example, an article did a study on autism, but it seems like their methods might have been weak. Their facilitator, there must have been a facilitator as part of their study. So the facilitator was encouraging the autistic child to answer questions a particular way. Thus, you could do the study again without the facilitator. So it sounds like, based off just this sentence here, that there was a study on autism, and it's like they had a facilitator asking the autistic child to answer questions, but you think based off reading that could have introduced bias into the study. So you're interested in doing that same study again, but you don't want the facilitator involved. So that's another example of using past research to inform future research to be able to get you an idea of something that you might be interested in. And then theory. Theory is another way that you can decide different research study, a different topic. So what is a theory? It is a scientifically acceptable principle offered to explain some sort of phenomena. It is a well-substantiated explanation of some aspect of the world based on a body of facts that have been repeatedly confirmed through studies. Theories can never be proven. Instead, they can be well established by studies over and over again. Your research question could test the theory. So let's look at an example of a theory. This is the attachment theory. There are so many different types of theories, but I just want to go through one.
The attachment theory argues that a strong emotional and physical bond to one primary caregiver in our first years of life is critical to our development. If our bonding is strong and we are securely attached, then we feel safe to explore the world. We know that there is always that safe base, which we can return to any time. If our bond is weak, we feel insecurely attached. We are afraid to leave or explore a rather scary-looking world, because we are not sure if we can return. People who are securely attached are said to have greater trust, can connect to others, and as a result are more successful in life. Insecurely attached people tend to mistrust others, lack social skills, and have problems forming relationships. There is one type of secure attachment, and there are 3 types of insecure attachments: anxious ambivalent, anxious avoidant, and anxious disorganized. In responses to distress, the first 3 react organized, while the last acts disorganized. To understand the theory better, let's look at Mr. and Mrs. Smith, who have 4 children: Luca, Anne, Joe, and Amy. The Smiths are lovely parents who cuddle, make frequent eye contact, speak warmly, and are always there for their kids. But one day, Mr. Smith falls very sick and dies. For Mrs. Smith, life now becomes very difficult. She spends all day working, while at the same time trying to care for her children. An impossible task. At 6 years of age, Luca's brain is for the most part developed, his character strong and his worldview shaped. The new situation does not affect him much. He knows there is still always Mum, his safe haven. He feels securely attached. Later, he turns into a trusting and optimistic young man. His self-image is positive. Anne, who is 3, has problems coping with the new lack of attention. To Anne, her mother now acts unpredictably. She is anxious about their relationship, and as a result becomes clingy. To get her mum's attention, she has to raise her emotional state and scream. When her mum finally reacts with a predictable response, she herself acts ambivalent and doesn't show her true feelings. Later in life, others think Anne is unpredictable or moody. Her self-image is less positive. Her attachment style is anxious ambivalent. 2-year-old Joe spends his days with his uncle, who loves him, but thinks that a good education means being strict. If little Joe shows too much emotion or is too loud, his uncle gets angry and sometimes punitive. This scares Joe. He learns that to avoid fear, he has to avoid showing his feelings, also in other situations. As an adult, he continues this strategy and has problems entering relationships. His image of himself is rather negative. His attachment is anxious avoidant. Amy, who is just 1 year old, gets sent to a nursery. The staff there is poorly trained, overworked, and often very stressed. Some are outright abusive. Amy therefore becomes anxious of the very people she seeks security from. a conflict which totally disorganizes her ideas about love and safety. As she is experiencing fear without resolution, she tries to avoid all social situations. As an adult, she thinks of herself as unworthy of love. Her self-image is very negative. Her attachment is anxious, disorganized. Our attachment is formed in the very first years of our lives, a time when we are too young to communicate our anxiety, and as a result can experience high levels of stress. Then our adrenal gland, an organ sitting on top of our kidneys, produces the stress hormones adrenaline and cortisol. The heart rate increases, the blood pressure goes up, and we become alert. If that happens frequently, it is called toxic stress. Toxic because it impairs the development of a child's brain and weakens the immune system. In embryos or at a very young age, toxic stress can even switch the expressions of genes, which can affect our health many decades later. By simulating a strange situation, we can assess an attachment style already by the age of 1. To do this, we let the child play with their mother for a few minutes inside a room. Then the child is left alone. The key moment is the child's reaction when her mother returns. Securely attached children first usually hug their mother, then can calm down and eventually get back to playing. Insecurely attached children can be ambivalent and avoidant. Some can't stop crying or refuse to continue playing. The long-term effects of our attachment in the early years are well documented. Using the theory, researchers at Minnesota University were able to predict already at age 3 if a child would drop out of high school with 77% accuracy. In another study, undergraduates at Harvard were asked to assess how close they felt to their parents. 35 years later, they were asked about their health. 91% of those who said they had a rather broken relationship with their mother were also diagnosed with health issues, including coronary artery disease, hypertension, and alcoholism. For those that had reported a warm relationship, the figure of poor health diagnosis was just 45%. But there is another reason why the early years deserve special attention. They are the starting place for subsequent behaviors. A kid that feels securely attached at age 2 can make friends at kindergarten. Their worldview gets reinforced with every interaction, and they develop optimism. As a result, they make good relationships at school, then at college, and later at work. Highly insecurely attached children can miss out on this opportunity. Psychologist John Bowlby, a pioneer in attachment theory, allegedly said, "What cannot be communicated to the mother cannot be communicated to the self." In other words, those who feel insecurely attached might not quite understand themselves. To get to know who they are and what they feel, they might have to go way back in time.
Okay, so that was an example of one theory. There's tons of different types of theories out there, and I'll give you a list here in a minute. Um, but theories serve two functions. We already went over this definition. So theories either organize and explain behavior. They provide a framework to make the world more comprehensible. So for example, consider Darwin's theory of evolution in animal species. This theory allows you to account for many facts and put them under the umbrella of this evolution theory. Theories also generate new knowledge. A theory can generate hypotheses about behavior, and then the researcher can conduct studies to test those hypotheses. If the hypothesis is supported, so too is the theory. So consider the attachment theory video that we just watched. Study after study reconfirmed that theory. So it wasn't just one study. They referred to multiple studies saying that, hey, there is great information out here about this attachment theory, and these different studies continue to support that theory. They continue to support it. So Again, theories can't be proven. Instead, they are well established by studies over and over and over again. So there's tons of different theories out there. This is just a quick search. When I just Googled, I think, psychological theories, and this came up. But Wikipedia, don't ever cite it in terms of something that you would turn in on paper, but it is good to be able to use to be able to kind of just know some general information. So these are tons of different ones that are out there that psychologists use when they're doing research. So you're welcome to take a look at some of those. Yep, this is the one that we looked at today, attachment theory. Okay, so let's keep going. Okay, so once you have your kind of big idea of what you're interested in studying, I think the last one of the examples that we did, we just looked, the big idea was cell phone usage. You can come up with any sort of big idea that you're interested in studying. Now you need to read about it. And when you read about that big idea, you'll read different articles and they'll help you inform your own research, and they'll help you understand what the problem is in terms of what gaps there are in the literature. Like, this study found something, this study found something, but what's missing is this. So you want to be able to add to the literature and to be able to solve a different problem. In order to know what that problem is, you need to read different articles though. So here we are on this step. That's what we're going to focus on now. So to find the problem, you need to read reports, and so you explore past research. So read about your general area of interest. The popular press is a good place to start to get ideas, but then after that, stick to academic resources only. Use the UNT Dallas Library to find academic resources. We'll pull up the library website in just a second. But when you go to these different search engines, type in a variety of keywords. For example, angry driving and road rage are going to generate two different types of results, and they don't completely overlap. So just be careful on the keywords that you're utilizing. Only utilize peer-reviewed sources, and what that means is that before that article was allowed to be published, it was reviewed by different peers in the field. So let's say that there's a psychologist at University of North Texas at Dallas, so right here, and they're interested in submitting submitting an article to a journal to get published because they did some research on it. The journal article isn't going to publish it until different peers also review it. And so that would be other professional experts in the field, maybe from different universities or from different companies, that also review it just to make sure it's of quality. So you always want to utilize peer-reviewed sources. And then for the purposes of this class and to get materials quickly, just focus on sources that we have the full text on. So our library doesn't have access to every single article out there, neither does every single library. Every library is limited in some manner. We have tons and tons of resources out there, so we have lots to choose from. But for the purposes of this class, let's just look at full text articles that we have available. And then how to know the quality of the source. So there's tons of information out there on the internet, as I'm sure you know. So some great ways to be able to know whether a research is of quality is to do peer reviewed. So just look at peer reviewed sources. And then also to choose from reputable journals. And there's 3 different ways to know whether a journal is reputable. There's the impact factor. And what that is how many times a journal has been cited, divided by the number of articles published in the journal over the last 2 years. The impact factor is on a scale from 1 to 10, and you can look it up here at that website if you had a logon. I don't have a logon for you, so I'm not expecting you to do that, but I just want to let you know what an impact factor is because it's important to researchers. And generally, if a journal has a high rejection rate, it's generally better. So less prestigious journals will accept a lot of the articles that get turned into them. However, if the journal article rejects, it has a higher rejection rate, it's generally more prestigious because it went through a more thorough process of being reviewed before it was allowed to be published by that journal. And there's no central website where that's maintained, but a list on the next slide is of some prestigious journals that I recommend that you utilize when you're looking up articles in this search engines. And open access journals tend to be less prestigious. What does that mean, open access journals? Those are journals that you can access just from Google. So they are, they don't have any sort of password protection on them. Like UNT Dallas, for example, the search engines here, you have to be a university student, therefore having a username and password in order to be able to access that information. So people just kind of off the street being able to access information, access journals, those tend to be less prestigious. So focus on quality journals when you're gathering your articles, and a list of them as kind of a cheat sheet can be here. This is from your book. So these are great journals that are focused on psychology. So when you are looking up articles, that's going to be part of your homework, which I'm going to explain here shortly. When you're looking up articles, these would be great journals to choose from. Not necessarily all of them, but this is kind of a great starting guide. So let's go ahead and pull this up first. So this is the UNT Dallas website. This was linked right here. It's that same link. And as a psychologist, you're going to be interested in this one or this one. And you can search, for example, here, angry driving and road rage. So let's say we're interested in angry driving. That's going to be our big topic. And then you'll want to do full text and peer reviewed, because that was part of my instructions here. Use peer reviewed, and then for the sake of this class, just use full text, something that we have now. And then go ahead and do a search. And these are some articles that come up. So you can read those different articles, and I'll explain the homework later. But that is how you do a search using the UNT Dallas website. You can also use the other link that was up there, the Psychology and Behavioral Science collection. Here is where it says what journal it came from. So this is the Journal of Counseling Psychology. I'm just trying to see if that's on here or not. I'm not seeing it right off the get-go, but you don't have to stick to just these journals, but these are just some good ones for you to know are reputable. But other journal articles, other journals are okay as well, especially because you are using the UNT Dallas search engines, and our search engines are reputable. Okay, so let's keep going. So these are some strategies for searching. So for example, I just typed it in here, real basic angry driving, but if you wanted to be able to limit your search results, you could use these different types of tips. So you could use and, or not. You could do advanced searches if you're interested in. But this was just a basic search, just typing it in as is. And if you're interested and you need more help with that, please contact our library, and they have researchers and they have people there that can assist you. So when you find some articles that you're interested in reading, one of the biggest things that you need to do is critique as you read. So you don't just read it, you're also critiquing as you go. So are the methods of data collection analysis appropriate for the research question? Are there indications that the data collection analysis is of high quality? Given the research question and the data collection analysis, are the author's conclusions reasonable? Are there significant methodological weaknesses? So these are just some ways that you can critique as you read. There are different questions that you can prompt yourself to ask as you're reading. That way you're ensuring that you're being an alert reader. You're not just kind of skimming, you are being an alert reader and critiquing. So this is an example on from the book. This was an article that they had analyzed, and so what they did first is they read it one time around, and then afterwards they read it again. And these were some things that they asked themselves as they were reading in order to ensure that they were critically reading the article. So critical reading is a more active way of reading. It is deeper, more complex engagement with the text. It is a process of analyzing, interpreting, and sometimes evaluating an article. When we read critically, we use our critical thinking skills to question both the text and our own reading of it. And everything that I'm saying will make more sense when I discuss the homework, because we're going to do some practical application of exploring past research, finding reports in the UNT Dallas website to be able to tie that back to what we're doing in this class. Okay, so when you go through the UNT Dallas Library website and you look for articles, you're going to have 3 different types of ones are going to be coming up. There's going to be literature reviews, theory articles, and empirical articles. So I want to explain what each one of those is generally, so you'll be able to identify it when you are reading. So a literature review is a summarization of previous research in a particular area. It basically looks at the results from different studies and just kind of summarizes it. So let's look at some examples. Sometimes I think it's easier to edit, copy, edit, paste. It's a little quicker. So this is an example of a literature review. So here you can even say, it's saying, therefore, this article provides an in-depth systematic literature review. So it's saying that adolescents have experienced some sort of physical violence by a dating relationship. This article provides an in-depth systematic literature which reviews the content and program components of bystanders and summarizes what is currently known about interventions. So it's not doing any research itself. What it's doing is summarizing the research that's currently out there. So that's what a literature review does, is it summarizes the research that's currently out there. Let's look at another example. So this is a review of literature on post-traumatic stress disorder victims and terrorist attacks. So it systematically reviews the literature on PTSD victims. It looked at 35 studies, and then it came up with some percentages. And it's saying that with the passing of time, PTSD can be expected to be affected in the community, and it affects relatives and friends. But again, it didn't do any research itself. It just reviewed the literature to be able to come up with this information. So it's a summary of what's already out there. Another type of research report that you'll run into are theory articles. So some research reports are the culmination of work that describes a theory. And a theory, as we described earlier, consists of a systematic body ideas about a particular phenomenon. So while literature reviews summarize, theory articles summarize, but then they integrate that research to provide a new framework for understanding a phenomenon. So let's look at a couple examples. So this is the theory of planned behavior. So it's summarizing, the theory has been well supported by empirical evidence. So there's been other research before, but it's providing a new way of reframing it. That way you can understand the theory in a new way. Let's look at another example. Self-efficacy toward a unifying theory of behavioral change. So it presents a theoretical framework to explain and predict psychological changes. It did a microanalysis, which is looking at different sort of studies before. But yeah, those are some examples of a study that's really focused on theory, a theory article. And then the last type of the last type of article which you're going to run across is an empirical article, and these are the ones that I want you to cite. So you're going to run across literature reviews and theory articles. You can read them if you're interested in, just to be able to learn more about your topic that you're interested in studying. But the ones that I want you to use as part of your homework are empirical research articles. And these are articles that there's actually a study has happened. The researcher actually went out and gathered data to be able to answer a research question. And they generally have 5 sections. So there's an abstract, an introduction, a method, results, and discussion. Some of these terms right here might vary by the type of article, but there's always look for a method. That's for sure going to be their method and results. So let's look at an example. So this was, it's called Logged In and Zoned Out, How Laptop Use Internet Relates to Classroom Learning. So there's an abstract here. So laptop computers are widely prevalent in classrooms. Although laptops are a valuable tool, they can be distracting temptation. The internet is a distracting temptation. In the study, so they did a study, we assessed the relationship between classroom performance and internet usage. Students were actually enrolled in a psychology class, so there's something happening. They actually did a study. They talked a little bit about past research, but there is a study that they're actually doing. And they found results. Their results showed that non-academic internet use was common among people who brought laptops to class. And here's the entire study. It's just listed here, but you can see that there's a method. They had participants. So they had 507 students were enrolled in a psychology class, and they were part of the study. There was a procedure that happened. These were their measures. They had a results section. Yeah, so you can see that there was an actual study that happened. There was these sections. It was not quite as clear cut in terms of the actual language, but they had a method section. They had a results section. And there was an actual study that happened. So I'm going to explain the homework here in a minute, but these are the types of articles that I want you to focus on. Here's more information about what an empirical research report looks like. So it has an abstract, which is a brief summary of the article. It introduces the study, which is the outline of the problem, ties it to past research, points the question to a method. Then it has the methodology, which is a detailed description of the study design. It has a results section, which is the objective report of the study's results. And then it has a discussion section, which is the interpretation of the study results. And then, of course, it lists its references as well. These are some, the next slides now we're going to go through each of these in more detail. So the abstract, again, is the summary of the research report. It tends to be 120 words or less. You generally write this after you're done with your report. So once you've completed your entire study, you'll go back and write the abstract to provide a summary of the information. The introduction section outlines the investigated problems. It describes the past research and theories relevant to the problem. It introduces the hypothesis. Problem statement is included here. So I explained what the problem statement is a little bit earlier in terms of when I explained the funnel. So the problem statement would be the fact that there's previous research on blank and it found this. There's previous research on blank and it found this. Now you're going to do a study on this because there's no information out there on that. The next section in empirical research report is the methods section, and it describes the study's design, so how the researcher went about answering the question. And again, we are going to, throughout this entire class, the class is called Research Methods. So we're going to go over different types of methods to be able to answer studies. So don't get too overwhelmed by the fact that there's some methods that you haven't heard of before, or you're not exactly sure when you're reading the methods section. It's okay. That's what we're going to be talking about the rest of this class. But the method section in general just kind of describes what they did to be able to gather data to be able to answer their question. The results section is the findings. So it's written in narrative form, but there also might be graphs and tables, so the findings of the research. And then the discussion section explains the results compared to past results. It gives recommendations for future research. So this is a section that you really want to focus on when you're critically reading, because this is how you'll be able to decide what you want your study to be, what you want your research question and your hypothesis and your prediction to be, because you'll base that on previous information that you've read. And then lastly, it has a reference section. So it has a list of citations, and if you need help on APA, that's how I expect you to cite your sources in this class. If you need help on APA, you can look at the current 6th edition of the publication manual. You can buy that if you're interested. You can also check out this website, which is great. Website that's kind of it's based on this here, the 6th edition of the publication manual. So let's just pull that up so you can see what that looks like too. APA releases different publication manuals, and this is the most current, the 6th edition, so it explains how to cite different sources. But you don't have to buy it. You can if you want, but this website is also kind of a cheat sheet to kind of explain how to cite correctly in APA. This goes over different formatting. This goes over the reference list. So, for example, in articles, how you would cite articles. So if you need help with that, this is a great resource to go to. Very, very important, do not plagiarize. So hopefully you know what plagiarizing is. It's the copying of another person's work, but it's also more than that. So we're going to watch a video on what plagiarism is. And just know that we have a policy, UNT Dallas policy, about plagiarism. It's included in our Code of Academic Integrity. So you can get into big trouble if you plagiarize. So please do not plagiarize. And let's go ahead and watch a video on what plagiarism is and how to avoid it.
Whether you're in the academic, creative, or professional world, plagiarism is all too common. But what is it exactly? According to the Oxford Dictionary, plagiarism is the practice of taking someone else's work or ideas and passing them off as one's own. Let's say you're writing something for the company newsletter, and you find a great article online that's full of useful information. So you take several parts of that article, change a few words around, and submit it without giving credit to the original author. That's plagiarism, and it can lead to serious consequences. In school, taking credit for someone else's work could mean you fail an assignment or class, or face disciplinary action. In the workplace, it could result in damage to your reputation, legal repercussions, or even losing your job. Even if you accidentally do it, such as forgetting to cite a source or misquoting someone, it can quickly get you in trouble. Luckily, we know a few strategies that'll help you avoid plagiarism. First, always cite your sources. Showing where you found your information gives credit to the original authors and helps reinforce the legitimacy of your content. If you're quoting from a source, Always quote the source's exact words. When inserting one into your work, place quotation marks around it, and be sure to include the author's name in the same sentence. When you want to discuss information from a source without quoting it directly, it's important you rewrite that information in your own words. Along with citing the source, use different language and sentence structures, and explore the source's ideas from your own perspective. This strategy can help you say something new, original, and plagiarism-free. Plagiarism can seem like an easy shortcut that'll save you time and effort, but it will only hurt you in the long run. Be clear and upfront about where you get your information, and you'll be free to create original content you can be proud of.
Okay, so this leads to our homework. So there's two different homework exercises for this week. The first one I have here in red and the second one here in green. So first I want you to decide your topic or your big research question you're interested in studying. And I want you to read 3 empirical research reports to understand it better. And then fill out the annotated bibliography Word document based on the reports you found. Use the library research engine to help you. So this is the template for the annotated bibliography homework. So fill out your name, find 3 full-text peer-reviewed empirical articles utilizing the library resources, and fill out the white sections on the tables. So here you would do your APA citation, summarize the article. This should help you critically read. So I told you earlier that you don't want to just read, you want to read critically. So what I recommend is reading the article once, just to read it, and then read it again. And as you're reading it again, ask yourself these questions as you go and answer them in the white box. So do that for 3 different articles. And so I recommend maybe to space out your time, maybe do 1 a day or something like that this week. But you just need to do 3 of them. And then the second part of your homework is apply it to your research. So once you've read it, I want you to decide what type of study you would be interested in doing based on what you've read. So previous research a lot of times informs what is needed out there in the field, what more research is needed. So set the scope of a study that you want to do. So you'll find where the gaps are based off reading those articles, and based on those unknowns, decide your hypothesis, aka a more specific research question, and then also write your prediction. So here we are in the funnel. We've come up with a big idea right here. We've read reports and we found problems. So that was our annotated bib. Based off that, we wrote our hypothesis and then we've come up with our prediction. And so for this part in green, I want you to put that in a discussion post. So by Saturday, go ahead and make your original post and then reply to 1 student by Sunday, each due at 11:59 p.m. And I've put this up as a discussion board. So this is due to me specifically, and then the other one, homework 2, is due as a discussion post. And if you have any questions, please let me know. Thank you and have a great week.